All right, when it gets this big, don't let it scare you. Look at that, all over. Don't let that scare you. All right, what's going on, everybody? Rob here, aka Trev2323. So I showed you how to get those command strips out. Right now, this is a 110-year-old, probably about 115-year-old now. I've been saying 110 years for 5 years. Chicago bungalow with plastered walls. Now the walls have been repaired so much that there's buckles. There's long line buckles all the way down the walls. And we also have had the house lifted before. Now we're gonna have to do a whole new corner bead. The lighting's not good because it's the color of the wall. But what I'm knocking it down with is a 80 grit sandpaper and a Black & Decker. And it'll start with a little line, and then you'll see the line spider crack. Now I'm trying to knock it down these high spots. If you could get the sander to go all the way across, you're even now. But it'll start out with the sander only on one side. So this is an 80 grit. And there's to catch a dust collector in it, and I'm not pushing hard. All I'm doing is knocking down the high spot. Now this one you can tell is a really bad crack. So I'm going to make sure this high spot into kind of a low spot so I can put the joint tape on the crack. And look, you're seeing other cracks come out from it. And some people will say like, oh, that's not good. But you want that right now if you're going to have a smooth wall. This is a bad crack right here. There's broken plaster behind this crack. So if you wanted to take the rest of the plaster out or put some drywall, you can. But we're not doing that big of a job. Where I'm going to knock this down as much as I can. Now you can see the sander coming off the wall. So you want the sander to be smooth on the wall, not coming off. So I got to knock this down so it's smooth right here. And it comes off the wall right here. Look, don't ask me to paint a room unless you're fully committed. So here we go here. These are all the lines that went off of one line. And all the lines. Now this was a plaster repair from before that I gotta try to get smooth. Now there's little plaster washers if it's broken off the wall that you could use that I'm gonna get into. But see all these lines, I don't know if you can come out the way. And then you can see the high points with the sun. There's a high point right here. You see it? It's a high point. So, and there's another high point over here. So all this when we paint is gonna shine through. So basically, this is where the TV was mounted. I'm gonna skim coat the wall. Now behind the door, when we had the house lifted, there's a huge crack right here. When we had the house lifted, okay? So, I mean, we don't know how long this paint job is gonna be for, but at least 5 years, maybe 10 years. So we're gonna knock everything down. Now I did the bathroom, and the bathroom had like, looked like brick-like pattern underneath that's been painted and painted and painted, and I had to redo the sink. So where I did the sink, it was completely silky smooth, and I regretted not just doing the rest of the wall. So hence in here, we're doing the rest of the wall to get everything knocked down silky smooth. Now with here, after I get this knocked down, it's not loose. The plaster's not broken off the wall right here. So I'm gonna knock this down flat or below flat, and then I'm gonna I'm gonna skim coat it with joint compound. Skim coat it with joint compound. It's probably gonna actually spread from the middle of the wall to here with joint compound to skim coat it, and it'll be completely solid. Here's another high point right here. And what I seen is that somebody actually repaired this from before, and they didn't use any joint tape. So that's why the crack just protruded right through. So when I skim coat this, I'm gonna skim coat this and use joint tape. I'm gonna knock everything down with the sander. That's the worst one, I think, right here. That's pretty bad. But we're gonna get everything out of here. So I close the door, put a fan in the window, and then get everything blown out that way. On top of this, we're having that window replaced. It's a brand new window. We had plastic on it because these are Chicago winters. probably the original window of the house, and with the plastic on this side and the cold on the other side, even though the plastic was on this side and the cold was on the other, we didn't breathe it, but there was a lot of mildew on the outside in the middle of that window, so we're just gonna have the whole thing replaced. All right, when it gets this big, don't let it scare you. Look at that, all over. Don't let that scare you. Now, I personally use the fiber tape. This is a sticky fiber tape that I tape all this. I'm gonna tape the lines for the fiber tape on here, and then with the fiber tape and your thin set or joint compound, I use joint compound. You start with the small, and you just do your lines with the small one, and then you let it dry. And after you let that dry, you knock it down even with your sander. This is a pole sander. This covers so much, and thin set knocks down really easy. This covers so much, and it gets the whole wall the same length, okay? Then after your first coat, you knock everything down, then you do a wider coat. And you see when you start doing the wider coat, it starts to fill in everything. And for the life of me, I can't find my really big one of these, so I'm gonna have to pick it up. So when you start doing your big one, it actually starts filling in the whole wall to knock it down. So let me keep going here. Okay, at this point you probably think I'm crazy, insane, but we had the house lifted and everything was just cracked really bad. This is separating a lot. Okay, so see, if you push in, this goes in. So I got plaster washers. I don't know if you've ever heard of what plaster washers are, but I gotta find out where behind the plaster, or what are called keys, they got the slats, the wood slats all the way, and then the plaster guys plaster, so the plaster goes through the slats wet and dries behind it, and that's what's holding it to the wall. Well, some of those keys break off, and that's where it becomes loose. So when it keeps buckling like that, even if you tape it and compound it, anytime weight or whatever goes on the floor, it's gonna crack it. So we gotta find out where all the places that the broken keys are. See, there's a big broken key right here because that whole thing's going in. And we gotta put drywall screws in there. So let me get this on, not drywall screws and plaster washers. And then we can wipe it all down really good and then start to, okay, I don't know if this place is still in business. From this old house is where I found these at. Long time ago when we first got the house, like 30 years ago. Charles Street Supply, 54 to 56 Charles Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02114. CharlesSTSupply.com. Okay, let me show you what these are. These are plaster washers. Okay, and I had some drywall screws. I prefer the thinner ones instead of the, but you need it like 1 5/8 at least. And these are actually gonna go right into the drywall, I mean the plaster, but you see where the plaster keeps moving? If I tape these and I sand it, it's gonna constantly move. So I have to find out where it's moving the most, but you don't do it right on here. You're supposed to do it like back here to get a good chunk of the plaster, but not bog it down to crack the plaster anymore. You might make a couple holes because you have to do it, if you go through and you might hit the middle of the slats. You gotta take it out and move around to try to find the slat, but you gotta try to find out where it's the loosest, and where it's the loosest, you're gonna put one of these in. So let me try to get a couple in. Really broken off the wall. Now sometimes with the plaster, when it's too far off, you have two options. Some of the keys fill behind this plaster, and that's why it's not going flat again. So you could cut this piece out, get all that out, put drywall, and it'll match up when you tape it off. But that's too much of a project. We're just painting the room right now, so I'm just getting it as smooth as possible. But I do know the keys are off in this area. So the keys are off in this area, so you grab your drill and you try to hit, not right here because you're just gonna crack it more. It gotta be a little bit further in. Then I got a slat. And then look, it flattens it all the way out and it holds it. Now this right here, got the little bump here. So I'm gonna put a piece of plaster tape in. And you can't even see them, maybe closer up. Okay, now that hole, there's 6 of them on that wall right there. Now when you joint compound that, and put your tape on there, you're not even gonna see it, and you didn't have to replace all that plaster with drywall. Okay, so we just checked, Plaster Street Supply is still in business, and my wife just ordered, how much were they, my love? $35 for 21 dozen plaster washers. That's what's holding all that in place. Those are plaster washers. So all the broken plaster that's sticking up, you're able to screw it down. They stick together, so make sure it's just one. So all this is loose press plaster. I got the plaster washers holding everything in place. Now my next thing is the joint compound. I'm gonna tape everything right now. And I'm gonna tape off everything right now. You know, with these plaster washers, I'm gonna get a little, I got a little painted body hammer. So I'm gonna hammer a little bit flat. They got teeth in it, and the teeth stick in there. But with my little painted body hammer, I'm just gonna make sure they're silky smooth before I start taping. Okay, never done this before, but I noticed that this one wasn't always smooth. You don't wanna break any more plaster. You don't want to break any more plaster at all. So you don't want, well, this is my paint and body dolly or hammer. So I'm just making sure they're all completely smooth without breaking any more plaster. Okay, so I'm gonna go around. I'm not beating the crap out of them. A lot of them are really smooth. I just want to make sure they're as smooth as possible before I start taping. What's going on, everybody? Rob here, aka Tram2323. Today we are on the road to plaster disaster. Check and stay tuned for the video. Okay, losing daylight here. Joint tape. One whole roll of, this is self-adhesive joint tape. I find it so much easier. Covered up every crack that I sanded down. Every crack, every line that I sanded down is covered in joint tape. Joint tape, even the screws. Now I gotta start with the small one and then let it dry, then the bigger one, then let it dry. Small, medium, large, 3 coats of compound. When you do your compound, it's just one thin coat like this. And then the next one is the bigger one over. Then the next one, that's when everything's overlapping. All right, so I keep moving it further and closer. So let me go get some compound. Okay, day 1 in the books. 2 breaks. I started at about 10:40 in the morning and it's 10:51 at night. These are plastered walls. All first skim coat. This one was the worst right here. This one right here, like I said, when we raised the main beam of the house, the walls just cracked with it. So if you're raising your main beams, when the house is painted, you've seen the cracks, but we're gonna paint again. You know, it was painted years back, so we're painting again, and then now we've seen the cracks, and I just couldn't see painting over all those cracks. So I'm just doing it the proper way. Now if you see, remember I had those screws in here. Okay, you can't see the screws at all. Can't see the screws. This one right here, you could almost see, but that's only the first skim coat. So you can almost see that one right there. But I got 2 more coats to go. So I taped everything. I used a sticky joint tape. So this is like you can see right here, the sticky joint tape. And that's the first coat. Now when I'm gonna sand it, I'm not just doing 3 coats, I'm sanding in between each coat. And then it's gonna get wider and wider. I had a little bit left over, and that's why I started to fill it in between right here already, just because I had a little left over. That's why it goes on gray, and when it's completely dry, it's white. Now another thing people do is, man, I can't do it. I can't seem to get it. I can't get the gist of it. Instead of having any dust, they use a sponge. And they smooth the whole wall with a sponge, the plaster with a sponge. For one, and I don't like the way it comes out. I know when I use a stick sander first to knock everything down with a stick sander, then I block sand everything with a sponge sander. Block sand everything with a sponge sander, comes out perfect. So I'm gonna get all new outlets. Ceiling's gonna be ceiling white, trim's gonna be ultra white, but this is repairing them broken plaster walls from when you go ahead and have your house lifted. So this will be silky smooth, but day one is in the books. Tomorrow's not really much. I'm gonna stick sand it, stick sand the whole thing with a stick sand and sander, then use a sanding block and sand it all down. Put one more coat on it. No, actually I'm not gonna put the other coat on it because I'm gonna go get, well, I got a wider spatula thingy to put it on, so maybe I'll do a second coat, then I'll take my run to the big box store. All right, day one in the books. Bye-bye. Okay, it's the next day right now. This is day 2. And this is how everything looks. I told you with the little extra that I had from doing the whole thing, I went ahead and just started filling in right there. So my honey did find me my bigger sander.